Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is a quick sound test. If you can hear me, please, can you type in the questions or in the chat? My name is Marino Vigliotti, and today I will take you through the GDPR compliance with GFI Software. Great, thank you, Jürgen. Jürgen, yeah, can see a few people typing. Excellent, thank you. I'll just go on mute and we will start in the next 3-4 minutes. Hello again, this is Marino Vigliotti again. Can you just do last final sound check, and also if you're able to see my screen, if you can kindly type in the question or in the chat. Brilliant, okay, so we're ready to kick off. The webinar will be recorded, also slides will be available, and we will, you will be informed by an email about the recording. So let's start. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Marino Vigliotti. I'm a sales engineer for EMEA and also head of the sales engineering team for Americas. Today, I will take you through a brief introduction on the GDPR, the compliance, and some possible solution you could use with the GFI software. However, before we start, it's very important I state this webinar is only about raising the awareness about the general data protection regulation. And it's an important disclaimer, you understand, whilst we are confident that the information contained in this presentation is accurate, it should only be used as a guidance. It's not as legal advice, because this relates to regulation stated by the European Union and actually applies to some general legal processes in every individual country. So, said that, let's start with some basic facts. So, 25th of May 2018, it's the enforcement date. 2 years back, in 2016, the European Union enacted a law called the GDPR, is a general data protection regulation, which is different from a directive because it means oblige every single country to apply that. And that is the deadline. It means the GDPR can actually start in countries even today. After that day, all the governments, they need to be compliant and able to go through their fulfillment of the general protection data. Now, is affecting anybody in particular? Yes, every single company, whether commercial, public bodies, organization, charities, and it's all about collecting and processing personal data. You will see times and times and times again this word personal data. Is it applying to specific verticals such as finance, hospitals, charities, everyone? And we will see in the next few slides why. The current regulation, legislation, what's going on now? In 1995, there was a directive on the general data, on data protection, and that was enforced by national bodies on privacy in every single European Union. That was a directive, so it means could have been more or less interpreted, and there was some local jurisdiction and so on. Then there were other directives, you can see the bottom there, directive on security, and if your company operates in the US market, you probably need to comply with the SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley Act. If your company handles credit card data, you probably need to comply with the PCI DSS. When I say comply, you need to probably, there are legal requirements. And there are other, the ISO 27001. What the GDPR is going to do is going to override the existing legislation on national bodies on privacy. And it's all about one thing, personal data. It's actually introducing a concept to strengthen the concept that was already present and define personal data. So when you're talking about GDPR, you're talking about enforcement and everything that relates to the personal data inside a company. Just some basic stats. So these are regulations about credit cards that have been handled for a very long time, but some companies are still not complying, and there are also information that you can see there are penalties going on, and there are companies that they still feel that they cannot fulfill the GDPR. These are just normal things. So over a period of time, regulation is an act, and some companies still not able to go through. Let's have a look at the more interesting parts. The GDPR introduced the concept of accountability. Accountability means the organization that is handling personal data of an individual has to care for storing, accessing, transferring, where it's going, what retention policy they have, what changes have been made, and give the power to the individuals and give some rights. For example, copy of data. We will see as an employee, you can ask your employer to have a copy of the data they have, and they have to give it here. What type of information are you storing? Are you storing about my name, surname? Are you storing about pictures of me, the color, or union membership, whatever? And the things that is coming across more and more in the news, right to be forgotten. So if you are in a company and you're collecting data for customers, the customer, they can ask the right to be forgotten. We'll go a little bit more in details. So company on one side, the left side is your accountability. In the middle, you have the individuals. and introduce and enforce the concept of breaches. If there is a data breach, you have to communicate it to the individuals, and then you need to let them know the gravity, where it's gone, and there could be possible penalties. We will say why possible. Doesn't always mean data breach will take you to court and you will automatically be fined. So based on that, what you can see on your right side, an organization before pretty much decided, I want to have a firewall, I need to protect my corporate data, that belongs to me, I have the rights to use the web filter if I want to, I can archive it, if I don't want any of them, it's pretty much decided by the company, the owner. And there were some rights, some privacy in every country. There were privacy regulation like Data Protection Act, but the employees maybe all the time didn't have the tools. I mean, they have to be going to court, do they lose their jobs, and so on. What the GDPR is going to do is going to change this needle. This needle is going to give them the same equal rights. If the company has the rights to collect data for and manage the data from corporate users, it's the same right on the employee side. So if you are an end user and you probably still have to provide data to the employees if you need it, but that is not going to be the big problem. The real big problem comes for investing in processing when it comes down to customers and clients. Because as an organization that provides services or collects data or processes data on someone else, these people, they have the rights to have copied the data. They have the rights to take their data, and it's called data portability. It's exactly the same like number portability. I want my data taken away from you as an organization and handled by someone else. And I want to have the rights to be forgotten, which means if these rights, they are asked by customers, the organization has to comply. And if they don't comply, the customer or the client could potentially go to court. It's the same for employees, but you need to think about the risks. Who is going to most likely to take you to court? Or your employees or your clients. This is depending on the organization. So as you can see, the needle is actually in less favor now for a company and an organization. Some key steps to cover in GDPR. So your employees and your customers, they say, I want my personal data because it's my personal data. And the legislation is saying, yes, it's all about personal data. And these are the 4 broad steps. It's about identifying, managing, protecting, and tracking. So these are the 4 steps we will go through very quickly now, so we can explain you how the steps that you want to cover will help you. Identifying personal data is literally going like a microscope. It means you need to classify, you need to distinguish what is personal from non-corporate data. If you are recording names, surnames, memberships, anything that can identify an individual, that belongs to that individual and becomes personal. However, at the same time, you need to distinguish it because this data can also be, if you are a lawyer, if you are a solicitor, or if you are working in other practices like architects, engineers, they still need to record the name of the person. Have you signed that certificate? That is not just a personal, it's also as the name of the person that has signed a legal document. The next step is about, once you have identified it, is about managing it. Has your organization given consent to collect personal data? This is already applicable under the Data Protection Act, but with the GDPR, you as an organization, you must explicitly ask, I'm collecting data from you about you and everything around you. Is this okay? So there are legal processes that you probably as an organization need to start to think about it. You need to provide it when you're collecting it. if the person withdraw their consent, you need to stop processing it, and you probably need to restrict it if this data doesn't need to be handled by all the employees inside your company. And of course, provide a copy if it's requested. So these are the first two steps, and they are very, very granular. And these are probably the toughest because it's actually going through what you have. We've seen in 2 slides how challenging would be. So protection. The second part is of the regulation is about protecting. If you are collecting and processing data, one of the key definition is protection by design. So it means the data is already protected before it's even collected, and there is a default in the protection. It's not about what you're actually doing. Is the system designed to protect and design data properly? And the final step is tracking. Okay, you got the data, identify it. Now there are two bits. The first part is there a data breach? Have you been able to identify the data breach, and so on. The second step, which is very important, and I want to pay some attention, is about maintaining a record of where this data is going. So if you are a company operating in the European Union and you have a legal entity inside the European Union and your data is collected inside the European Union, that is covered by the GDPR. As at the moment you are holding data and you're transferring it outside the European Union, this is actually a step that you need to track. You need to track because if you're not tracking this data, it means you're putting it out, an individual personal data held inside the European Union, outside the European Union, and that can actually go outside the jurisdiction. The person will not be able to claim anything. So tracking data, is it going to, are you passing your database of customer to a third party? Is this third party operating in South America, North America, China, whatever? That is actually outside European Union. This is what could actually make the things complicated. So on these things, I just want you to have a look, reflect on the data and the data you're collecting. It's very easy. You have a lot of devices there, and what they do, they generate a lot of logs, they generate a lot of database information, files, emails. It's great. You remember, you need to identify. That's equivalent to going through every single file, every single thing. Are you able to identify? So the more you're collecting, the more you are going to collect in the future, the more is going to increase it. I'm not suggesting by any means that you should stop collecting, but the first step is actually find out what are you collecting as an organization. Because if you are collecting, you're generating a lot of cheap data stored somewhere. This data after the 25th of May 2018 has to be classified. You need to already start to do it with your archives, and that is the cost. It's not about the system. It's not about buying software. It's about the processes to go through and be sure that you're getting closer to the compliance. When I say getting closer, because it's a very big task, even for big companies, never mind the small SMB. So we are talking about IT. So people don't often work in this process. It's all a little bit gray and everything. I would like to just give you some advice how you could start to think and how you could start to work. Is it just breaking it down in a much easier way? Classify the data. The most risky operation about GDPR is a data rest. It's not actually data transit. Yes, data transit is important, but once it's transit, it's more, it doesn't actually stay anywhere. So data breaches are actually happening more often in data rest. So most likely for data sitting on your servers, or maybe data you have exporting on the cloud or in a data center, it doesn't really matter. If you have a basic encryption, when I say basic, you don't have to have the super fancy latest encryption. Data in transit is less risky than data at rest. So start to identify where the bulk of your data is at rest. In your office, is in the cloud, on somebody's computer. And location. Location means actually is sitting on the server. Is it sitting on the server in my data center? Is it sitting on a host center called cloud, whatever? So most likely, for small companies, they might end up working on data centers, yes, but most likely they will be working about servers they have in the office. Service they have in the office and possible a lot of other a lot of services external to the cloud. Finally, we go to the containers. What's a container? It's basically the type of information that is contained in email, files, databases. So you can break it down again. So employees, about personal data, most risky data, maybe comes in emails. Customer data may be stored in databases, could potentially be on files if you're working a lot with files. So this is a very simple way to actually start to classify the data, breaking it down in location and containers. Already following these steps will help you to identify your risks, because when there is a breach or there is a possible claim, you need to be able to prove that you followed some basic strategy, how you actually started to protect the data. Where did you start? Did you ignore it altogether? So I want to show you some basic tools you could use from GFI point of view. We cover from the cloud, the perimeter, to inside the network. So we have IT solutions where actually personal data is stored, like Carrier Connect inside the network, or Carrier Cloud, or the One Connect, which is the resilient system. And then we have also devices and software which help you to protect personal data, starting from Carrier Control and Mail Essential on the perimeter, then archiving, where you extract the data from your database. And on your right side, you will have LangGuard and Event Manager, which will help you patching and extract logs. So they don't all apply, absolutely not. I just want to give you an idea how you can split the system, say which system is holding data, which is helping me to protect the data. This is a basic example how you could start to work in your organization. So GDPR is 99 articles. I don't even know the number of pages, so we cannot go through everything, but we can start to work on something like how you can protect, at the very least, the data that you collected already. Never mind identifying it, at least what you have there, the first step. What's your next thing? Perimeter. You can start to work on the perimeter with a proper UTM, next generation firewall, and inspecting every single thing using IPS and IDS. And you can also have monitoring, which give you the alerting system and the breaches and policies on who has been accessing what. So this is about moving around moving into the perimeter zone of your company. One basic step to do is I have a small company. I have a firewall that is built in the router because it's provided by a service provider. This is the first step. The GDPR will say it requires organization to provide reasonable level of protection for personal data. Having a modem is not actually deemed to be a security device. You need to look at UTM, next generation firewall. Are you inspecting all the data? There is a massive difference. You don't have to spend thousands of euro, dollars, pounds, whatever, but proving that you have upgrading the from a basic telecommunication device to the next generation firewall is already a step to prove that you are making reasonable effort to protect it. If you're transferring data to a third party, are you using the secure VPN? Because if you're not, data can come in and out, you don't know about it. What applications are actually being used to transfer data outside your company? Are you filtering on TeamViewer, on FTP? Are you using other devices, Dropbox? This is data that flows in and out, and you maybe want to start to stop some application to help tracking your data. And finally, not least, is gateway protection on the antivirus. People say, I already have an antivirus on my machine. Yes, that's correct. But that is your last point of defense. After that point, the machine is not protected anymore. You need to stop all the threats to even reach the machine if it's possible, and centralizing and proving that there are no spreads inside the network. Nothing is spreading beyond what you have already put in place on your perimeter. We're moving inside the network now, and we're moving inside with the LangGuard. So if there are vulnerabilities in your systems, they are often linked to OSs or applications, and LangGuard help you to identify the vulnerabilities and patches and tracking it, and make sure that only, for example, the security patches are applied to reduce your disruption. Provides you with an automatic remediation, which means you automatically force people to have patches applied. Why? Because this shows that you are making an effort to protect the data as soon as the vulnerability has been discovered and the patch is available. So you can actually classify you can see classification of the security levels, medium, low, high, and you can have a push for security patches immediately on the highest level, and that will automatically force machines to be patched. You will also show you that what the security patches are missing. Are you using the OSs which are not patched anymore? Are you using devices which are not available for software subscription and security anymore? This is going to give you also an overview of where you probably will have your weak points. The next step is about securing the data, the personal data. If you have data in a email server or file, and you need to extract it, you need to lock it, because this data belongs to the record of a lawyer or an architect or any other profession which is highly regulated. You need to extract it from your possible IT systems, wherever they are, and lock it away and make it compliant so it's available for the next 10, 20 years, whatever. So with Archiver, you are able to fulfill all the regulatory archiving proposition that you need to have in place, all the fulfillment of the data that you have archiving, and also documents. There are different methods you can use. You can have different scopes, just inbound, outbound, just internal mail. You can move on to the archiving assistant for files, so you can actually start to check all the files that have been archived and put away. So not just on the USB, have a USB lying around. Is this going in a central device? Is this device fully archived? Yes. And last but not least is Event Manager. Event Manager is log aggregator. Why is log aggregator important? Well, first of all, you start to track devices. Which devices are present on your network, which they log on, and which users. This is giving you visibility who is doing what. And also going to cause problem because you will have data related to people, but that is going to show that you are making an effort to protect the data. Are you investigating data breaches? Yes, you can do that with the central log management and the aggregation. I keep saying aggregation because you can already do log management, and I want to show you the classic data breaches. Data breaches happen, first of all, because somebody is guessing someone else's password. An application is being hacked and is trying to guess passwords for something else. How do you do that? Failed logon. You have all your logon in your workstation, laptop, fine. Does the IT person goes around and check how many logs in, log in, log out correctly? Possibly not. Maybe there are a lot of failed logon. Can you do this for every single machine? With the event manager, you're able to aggregate all these logs, so you don't really need effectively go through every single machine. All the logs, they are aggregated and moved into the management, the event manager. And this will give you the first early warning if there are attempts or steps towards breaches. And you can see what we show you live. Also, another thing, logons are not the only sign. Machines which maybe have an application they're doing a little bit too much, they generate a lot of events locally. They generate these events. These events, if there are a lot of events, you probably want to know why that laptop is constantly generating events. What type of events are there? That is the first investigation. Why this software is running there? Is this software not compliant? Why? What is taking it? So you can actually move on to a general, from a very specific to a very general identification of the computers which are possibly leaking data. Tools used by national authorities. The European Union has done their bit. They've done the regulation, they're happy, and they're pushing it down to the national authority. And they're saying, now is the time to use some tools. Tools for them means penalties, and doesn't actually mean that you need to go to jail. They will need to, national authority will need to have enforcement. If you report it to a national authority, well, yes, there are, you can go to jail, you can spend a lot of money on fine, but you still need to go through some steps. So it's not terrible. And what is very important, the penalties are all related to, if you have a look, the nature, the gravity, and the duration of the violation. If these are consistent, then you will hit the top end of what is imposed by national authorities. I'm not saying that you will not have it, but you need to show that you made an effort and there was no negligence there. You've been protecting the data. Are you working with the authorities to show that the data is actually is gone out? Have you managed to inform the person? Is the person happy that that data maybe is gone out and is not controlled? These are what is taken into account. If you imagine that every single company reporting to their national authority Locky or any other encrypted computer, that will completely clog the system. So ransomware, yes, it's a risk, but are you actually able to prove that you have registered of the incident? You wrote down this computer has been hacked, it's been data has been encrypted, I cannot access. That is the registry of the incident that will help you to prove that you're going through this. And some of the tools that you've seen will help you to mitigate it. So I want to show you very briefly now about Event Manager and what with the Event Manager you're able to do. So is a log aggregator, so you collect the data from all the devices, and you can start, for example, from how many accounts have been locked out, how often they get locked out, accounts which had fell on logon, the list of the logons, and they generate reports. Are these happening on a regular basis? Why they're happening? Why they've been failed logon? Something else very important: if somebody is accusing someone else inside the company that they have accessed the data, they can you can actually use log off event. Say, look, at 5 o'clock I logged off. I wasn't able to do anything. So why are you claiming that after work I keep getting and importing my data outside the company now? So very basic steps that they can actually help you to prove that some of these protections and monitoring on the data breaches are actually in place. Critical messages, you can go down, and depending on the complexity of your organization, what level of complexity you're going to address. You can go down to the very basic forensic one. After you generated some reports, you want to start to have a look, failed logon, outside the hours, inside the hours, why they happen, who was that, and that will be, again, an IT job, but you're able to go through the forensics and actually start to address some of the issues and inform individuals, if not authorities, about possible data breaches. And that applies to file servers, applies to objects, to policy changes. You can go down to text logs, to system events, and you can go from the reporting level to the event level to the configuration. You can exclude specific computers, you can exclude specific devices, so you might not log every single thing that is available on the network. Otherwise, you could be checking someone's personal device. You have event-based processing, monitoring, acting. These are the devices that they will automatically go in buckets and they will be logged as against the specific Windows events. Without going into many details, I will now move on to the final stage and ask you if you wish to ask any questions and start to implement the basic thoughts on how you're going to process this IT data that is coming, or actually is already sitting inside your network. So I'm available now for a few questions. I can see a message from Lisa. Hi, nice to see you again, Lisa. Yes. And there is a question from William. I'm missing mobile phone and smartphones. Yes, that's very important. Willem asked what you're going to do with the mobile phone. The mobile phone, if it's a company mobile phone, as a company, you can ask to sign the declaration that that device belongs to the individual, but all the data is held and managed and processed by the company. And then you give explicit, the individual is given explicit consent to process that data. They might say, I don't want you to use that data anymore, and then you need to start to take some legal advice how you can manage that. Yes, and if there is a personal device that is logged on onto the network, at that point you can say no, no personal devices are logged onto the Wi-Fi because I'm processing data, and I can go through a guest network, and through the guest network we don't track anything. So personal devices, whether it's a tablet, whether it's a mobile phone, personal computer, they might not be allowed on the network, or you should remove them from the network if you want to avoid more data being collected. Any more questions? Okay. There is information about a question from Lisa. Is it true from IT point of view that something like hidden MAC address counts as a personal data? Yes, it's true. So if you're tracking the MAC address and you're associating it to a specific individual, and it's okay. Because you can, unless you have extra data, you're not able to go back through the MAC address to that individual. So the key thing is about MAC addresses, they or other devices, they need extra information. If you don't need anything, if you, this is an example, again, don't take it as legal advice. If you're putting a poster inside your office with all the MAC addresses and with all the names, then you're explicitly telling who is using what. Yes, so you don't need anything. But as an IT administrator, you could potentially use that MAC address and it's locked away, and there isn't just a one-to-one association, and you need to use it to collect data that is becoming a gray area at that point. Any questions? If someone send to the wrong mail address, is that a breach? It's all about intent. You need to prove that if that person was actually sending data and had an intent, or there was a misspell or whatever. Again, these are the granularity. I'm not a lawyer. You're talking about court cases. I've been attending a few conferences, been talking to national authority a few times, and what they're trying to do, they're trying to amalgamate all the laws across the European Union, so personal data is treated exactly in the same way, whether you are in the UK, whether you're in Germany, France, Italy, doesn't really matter, or Greece, doesn't really matter. So it's about there is possible dispute. I won't take any further than that, because it becomes an extremely complex court case. Do you need to report that you send the wrong email addresses? You can put a disclaimer. It's already happening now. If this information is not for you, that is already in a step in that direction. Reporting, it's very, again, you need to differentiate between what you can send an email to the wrong person, say, hello, I'm not providing you with the sales forecast today. That data means absolutely nothing. If you are sending an email to someone and you're putting a lot of personal data, and you send it with the email addresses, with the date of birth and everything, you probably, first thing you need to do, you need to, and again, you need to please speak to a lawyer or somebody. Somebody has to send a file with all personal data to another organization. Do I need to report it to just the individuals? Do I need to report it to the authorities? This is something very, very important. You actually understand as an organization what has gone wrong and the gravity of what has been sent out. There are no, although they try to specify data that is personal, you need to be careful about what you're reporting, not just okay, I report everything. You could risk to log everything. Again, if it's a risk, log it, start to create incidents, so you prove that you are doing something, you're just not ignoring it. And you might ask someone else. Speaking to the lawyer will take me 2 weeks to come back, and so on. Taking the right steps is about proving that you're doing something. Knowing that there is a data breach and not doing anything, that is worse. What are your thoughts? Thank you. To say again, these are about work emails that are received on mobile devices. Again, who's the owner of the mobile device? Is the company? It's the individual. Do you provide this individual with their own? Can individual using their personal devices on with work emails? Yes. So that was already in place before. If you're already allowing data leaks on personal devices which don't belong to an organization, you don't need the GDPR to there are organizations which don't allow any personal device to be used for work-related activities, and typically are the financial organization, because they want to have 100% control of where the data is and everything. So again, we're looking about these people here. If there is already regulation in place, if you are working in highly regulated environment, you're already probably breaching it, because there is already something there that you should have done. So GDPR is only going to enforce it on the personal data. Any more questions? And again, if you have a doubt, start to investigate it, because as a company, you really need to show you're making an effort. That's very important. Is the first step. If you do absolutely nothing, that is the worst. I just want to let you know, for all that they're listening. So until now, as far as I know, data breaches, there were only the only companies were obliged to report data breaches until now were the telco company and of course the financial companies. So this is what is extending it. So there was already something in place. As you can see, things are not out of the blue. There was already something. Is tightening some special regulation, some parts of existing regulation, and making it much more stronger and from the user point of view. So if we don't have any more questions, I will stop here. The recording will be sent to you, and we'll be sending you also the presentation. And again, remember, this is just information about raising awareness. There is no legal advice on that. Thank you very much, and speak to you soon. There is one more question. Just reading the question from Jürgen. Oh, there seems to be. Oh, hold on a second. Right. Question from Jürgen. Right. Okay. Question from Jürgen. Modem router is it now GDPR compliant? Actually, there is no certification. There is literally, you can't just say this is a device that is GDPR compliant. Because compliance is the entire process. Showing that having a router, that is probably not strong enough to hold back all the attacks, that might not be sufficient. If you have a financial company, I'm just making it up, 10 people, you're quite happy with your router, you have a basic firewall that say on the router, say stop everything in, everything out is fine. Actually, you are not showing any due diligence, because if you have an attack from the inside that leaks data out, you're letting everything out. So you need to consider the risks of what data you're holding, what security on the perimeter you are having now. Is your modem strong enough? Is your basic firewall nothing in, everything out? Yes. Then could be easily something that you need to discuss with the authorities. Big companies, they've been sued with the very big firewalls, and because probably they didn't apply other tools. So again, showing that you are making it, you don't have. Another thing that is important, just laughing, when I spoke to the Italian director for the privacy last week, he was saying, you need to show that there is an investment comparable to what you can afford. If your company has a revenue of 100,000 a year, they are not expecting you to spend 50,000, 60,000 on IT. You will just burn everything out. But if you're spending 50 euros, maybe they might think, wasn't enough, at least on the perimeter or inside the network, to protect it. So you need to be able to show that what they have spent and the effort they have put, especially in the processes, is more about the process than what you're actually buying. So I know it doesn't sound great, but if you need to save money, try to spend money on the processes more than buying software. I wish you could buy more GFI stuff, but try to buy time and processes that is more important than the actual device. Hopefully this helps. Okay, Thank you very much. If there are no more questions, you can, or if there are more questions, you can speak to your channel manager, SC, local. They will come to me. I'm not an expert, but I'm quite happy to point you in some direction. There will be blogs and there will be also white papers. So the information you've seen is actually coming from a white paper, and you can subscribe it and you can get the full white paper, which is has been the base for this presentation. Thank you.